Hi, I'm Heather from KDZ, and this little video is going to introduce you to the thinking I have done around ecofascism to get us to become very literate at how vulnerable we are to ecofascism, given our white supremacy culture patterns and given our fear of what's happening with climate change and a collapse narrative. So to begin, someone posted on a Facebook group that was a collapse-driven organization. They posted something about mining and electric cars. And I took from the comments some language and vocabulary that and ways of framing things that I think are problematic and make us vulnerable to ecofascism. So I'm going to show you the comments, and then I invite you to pause the video and think very carefully about what might be problematic with what has been said. So to get the most out of this, I really encourage you to use that pause function on the video player. Okay, first one. So this is regarding electric cars. The person wrote, the question to ask yourself is it better for the environment, or does it appear to be better for the environment? So before you pause, and I do want you to hit pause, think to yourself, what is it about what this person wrote, the whole question, that could be problematic? So go ahead and pause. Okay, now I'm going to tell you my thinking about this. And of course, when I'm in conversation with people through workshops or through the Facebook group, where we have a unit called, a guide now called Ecofascism, people can put their reflections and thinking, and that really does help develop my own thinking. So this is just where I am at the moment in what I see as problematic with this. So we're talking about the environment, which means likely this person is ignoring the cost to humans. So are electric cars better for the environment? We might be thinking in terms of emissions and not necessarily in terms, well, because we're talking about emissions and also what we need in order to make the electric cars, right? But what we could be ignoring is the sacrificing of humans on indigenous land. So is it better for all humans on the planet? Maybe is a better question than just kind of talking about the environment. You may have come up with other problematic bits, and I'd love to hear from you, either through the Facebook group, and there'll be a link at the end of this video to how to join, or if you want to attend a workshop, you can book that on the website, and there'll be a link to that as well. Okay, so the next comment. How can we tell if the costs outweigh the benefits? How much destruction are we willing to do to keep this way of life going until it hits a wall en masse? So again, pause it, look at this quotation, and have a think about what could be problematic with how this has been written. Okay, so we're going to look at what I picked out from this. And it is that it objectifies land, ecosystems, and people. So it's talking about things in terms of costs and benefits, rather than, like, how do you value a human life? How do you value an ecosystem? Costs and benefits sounds like, a much colder calculation that's being made that isn't taking into account life. And when we say keep this way of life going, that implies a kind of privilege. Is this an indigenous person speaking? Are they saying how much destruction are we willing to do to keep our indigenous way of life going? No, this isn't someone saying that. Is this a poor person who can't find clean water speaking? How much destruction are we willing to do to keep this way of life going? They don't want to keep this way of life going. We're so used to hearing people like us talking about climate change, collapse, etc., that we don't really question the biases and assumptions that are being made when we have this conversation about what to do. Okay, pause. And you might want to pause the video and take some notes, etc. Share reflections in the Facebook group if you're on there. And then we will go on to the next one. When we do something better for the environment, like driving an electric car, this doesn't mean that we cannot also pressure the corporations to make its production better, both environmentally and socially. Okay, so I invite you to pause the video and think about what is problematic, what could be problematic with the way that this has been framed, the language being used. Okay, welcome back. So going back to the white supremacy culture patterns, which is the first series of videos, and if you haven't seen them, I really encourage you to do all the videos in the order that they're presented. Some of them can be mixed up, but the white supremacy culture patterns I refer to a lot throughout the entire series. And one of the patterns is the idea that there's binary thinking, that it's simplistic, quick fixes, easy solutions, lack of complexity, lack of nuance. And so to say, well, it's easy. We can get an electric car and at the same time send some letters to the company saying that we want them to be more environmentally and socially friendly. And then job done. We don't have to do anything else. We get to keep our lifestyle and we've done our bit for the poor people and the land in whatever country it is that made the lithium batteries, right? So it's very simplistic in that way. It also implies privilege once again, because if we ask ourselves, what kind of person would say this? And if we say, is it someone who can't find clean water day to day and has trouble, just with day-to-day survival? If it's someone living in a traditional indigenous way, would they talk about something being better for the environment? Would they talk about driving an electric car? Would they talk about having the means and resources to pressure a corporation? Would they think that that would even work? So I really invite us to question privilege whenever we are having these conversations. Pause. Especially if you're in the climate change, environmental movement space, you will recognize all of these conversations, and it can be challenging and very uncomfortable to question what's going on. So notice that your nervous system might have been activated a bit, trauma response, and breathe and listen to the cars going by, listen to the birds, the neighbors laughing, and notice that we're okay right now, right here. Let's go on to another one. For me, we can't change anything. It's too late. Go ahead and pause. You might think this yourself. Can't change anything, it's too late. But pause the video and think about what might be problematic with this framing, with this language. Welcome back. So this kind of thinking assumes that we have a lack of agency, that we actually don't have power as individuals or as a community. So it's just, that's it. We can't do anything about it. And this comes from what I've spoken about in other videos, but not really explicitly, is the idea that the white supremacy culture patterns seem to stem from some kind of, generational trauma that happened to light-skinned people, maybe. Something big that made us feel separate from one another, that made us feel like we don't have enough. So there's a bit of desperation. And when we don't have each other, it means we get a feeling of powerlessness. Nikki Cashton does work on the separation and scarcity and powerlessness. So for me, we can't change anything. It's too late, is like this pattern of powerlessness. So that trauma that we have from being brought up in a white supremacist culture leaves us feeling powerless, right? Like we've been educated in schools where we're not taught great critical thinking skills, where we're taught to obey and to be in kind of in what some people call a factory setting of education, where we're supposed to memorize things and then do these particular kind of tests, which only indicate certain aspects of our intelligence and what we can contribute to society. And so, we see the people in power and we're like, we can't do anything about that. We've been trained in that way. And people tend not to think, well, we as a group can't do anything, because we're also much caught into individualistic thinking. So like, I can't do anything, you can't do anything, we can't do anything, rather than we maybe could do something. We don't know how to collaborate very well. This came up in the white supremacy culture patterns. Which leaves us feeling very isolated, which can then leave us feeling powerless. And it also means that we're not, putting everyone's creativity and flexible thinking together to come up with appropriate responses to what's happening in the world. Okay, pause. Have a think, jot down some notes. Notice how it feels in your body. And now, if we were in a workshop, I would have you go into pairs and look at, what comes up for you when you hear the phrase ecofascism. So far, we haven't spoken about ecofascism, although the name of the workshop is ecofascism. So have a think about what comes up for you when you hear it. And then we're going to look at what Wikipedia says. Okay, so under Nazism, it says here that these two authors suggested that the synthesis of fascism and environmentalism began with Nazism. And they've written a book about it, noting that the Nazi Party's interest in ecology was linked with traditional agrarian romanticism and a hostility to urban civilization. The terms blood and soil, the concept of a nation having a mystic connection with its homeland. And as such, the nation is duty bound to take care of the land. So people who label themselves ecofascists now, according to Wikipedia, they cite the Nazi Party as an origin point. So we know what the Nazis were about. And what we might not have known is that some of their justification for what they did had to do with the land, ecology, connection, kind of spiritual connection between the people and the land. Have a pause. If you're doing this as part of the guide in the Facebook group, feel free, to go there and add comments about whether you're surprised about this, what your feelings are, what comes up for you when you think about ecofascism being linked to Nazism. Okay. Pause the actual video if you'd like to take more time. Now, teen Vogue is getting to be pretty notorious for being quite radical for young people in the United States. And they do an article on ecofascism. And it says, if there are calls for clean water or even protecting an animal in a habitat, often there might be a clue with how racist groups describe what the harm is to that environment. Who is causing the harm? Who is being blamed? How are they being talked about? Are these oppressed people? Are they blaming rich, space-going entrepreneurs? Or are they blaming refugees or immigrants? Is it a racialized group or an ethnic group that is being characterized as the harm or the cause? So whenever we see people talking about the problems, we want to see who is being scapegoated, who is being blamed, how are they being spoken about? And then the teenagers reading this magazine are encouraged to identify eco-fascist arguments by asking what solutions are being proposed. Do the solutions include excluding people, shutting borders, pushing people out, like with Brexit in the UK, making people leave, increasing military, adding in more policing or surveillance? Are we denying people the ability to flee their homes for safety? Or are we denying people the ability to stay in their homes? So getting really good at asking all of these questions when we see solutions being offered. Because these are examples of ecofascism. We need to be able to step up and interrupt it when it happens. And in the next workshop guide, we will look at being an ally which I think is more than just being an ally, but it's how do we interrupt racism and fascism in certain circumstances? What are some ways to do that? Okay, we're going to look at some more examples now. The only way is a steady reduction of human population. I want you to think about what could be wrong with this, what could be problematic with it, what could put off flags of ecofascism. Pause the video and then think about it and come back. Welcome back. So when we talk about human population, are we talking about all humans? Or are we talking about reducing the population of other humans or people like us? Or what are we talking about here? Because maybe it's better to talk about consumption. In fact, it is better to talk about consumption. Again, looking at a community of indigenous people in Colombia, which is where I'm doing these videos from, 12 kilometers from Bogota in a town called La Vega. We go out into the Amazon of Colombia and say, there needs to be fewer of you because you're destroying the planet. No. We don't want to talk about humans in this generic way. Instead, we want to say that it's consumption that's the problem. It's the way that we are consuming things, consuming up resources on the planet to meet the desires of a particular group of humans, not all humans. And if we set ourselves a numeric goal, which came up in the white supremacy culture patterns list around quantity over quality and progress means more and better. If we say a steady reduction of human population, if people use that as a mantra for what needs to happen, that's numerical. If that's what we're holding on to and we're really scared about what the future is going to bring, and we think that the way to solve it is to reduce human population, then what we want to see is a decrease in numbers every year. We don't care if it comes from COVID, from war, from preventable diseases, famine. We just want to see a steady reduction. And that is a form of fascism because you're sacrificing people in order to reach a particular goal. We don't care what the means are. We don't want to know what the means are. We just want to get to a place where we can continue our particular way of life and not have to be afraid of the future. Just pause there for a second. Blaming population is very popular, and it's nuanced. And I'm not going to claim that it's not nuanced. But when people just say it blatantly as a simple, we need a reduction in population, it's not taking into account those other factors. Okay, so carbon emissions is another example, which I've used before in earlier videos. If we want to get to zero carbon emissions, then that again becomes a goal and not how we get to it. So if we think the only way to have a habitable planet for humans is to get to zero carbon emissions by a particular date, we're so scared that we just want anyone with power to make it happen. Just get us to zero. I don't care how you get us to zero. I don't care whose lives have to be sacrificed to get us there, as long as my life, my way of life, my family, the people I love are going to survive this and be able to carry on as we have. And that is ecofascism, to have solutions that are sacrificing other people. In my opinion, that would be a definition. Okay, pause. You might disagree. Share your thoughts. Love to see you in a workshop or in the Facebook group in the guide under ecofascism. Okay, so this came up earlier. One of the white supremacy culture patterns is binary thinking, either or, and nuance is just not in our patterns, in our culture. And so it's anti-white supremacist culture to be able to look at nuance and to sit with really hard questions and to say, this is tough. We want to invite that discomfort. The whole workshop series, all of this work is very uncomfortable. And the better we can get at sitting with that discomfort, the better we're going to be able to regulate our nervous system so that we can come up with creative ways to respond to what's going on. Okay. Last one. Yes, we are all eco-fascists, although, as you say, unwittingly for many. So this was, again, in the comments on a Facebook group where someone had written about mining and electric cars. So pause the video and have a think about what's possibly problematic with this. Okay, yes, we are all eco-fascists, although, as you say, unwittingly for many. So this glibness, it's problematic to be so glib, right? It ignores the particular danger of ecofascism. If we say that everyone is ecofascist, then it doesn't matter if we're talking about Bolsonaro or Boris Johnson or Trump or Joe Biden, you know, like we're all eco-fascists and so are they, and who cares? We want to be able to see the particular danger of eco-fascism, which would be particular solutions being offered. So yes, you could say that we might be complicit. I've got my iPhone next to me. I have flown this year a couple of times. You know, we're complicit in destruction and even death. But I want us to look at the people with the power to move resources on this earth, money, infrastructure, people. When those people have power over others and they are putting into place eco-fascist solutions, that's a different level than us being complicit. Yeah, we still have to take personal responsibility, but let's just make this really clear that there are people who are working towards figuring out a way that something's going to work for everyone, and there are other people that think it's okay to come up with solutions that sacrifice humans, other species, and ecosystems. When you become literate in ecofascism, you begin to see it in a lot of places. And that's why I want us to get really literate on this so that we can call it out. And there are ways to call out that are more effective than other ways. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next video, being an ally. So I invite you to go to the website to book these workshops if you want to do something live with me, or if you would like to join the Facebook group, there's a link to that as well, so that you can reflect on these topics and themes with other people who've been to the workshops or have been doing the video series. And we're all able to have these conversations coming from the same framework, the same attitude of curiosity on what we're missing in these movements and what we need to work on to figure out how to take care of each other and keep each other as safe as possible. If you'd like to support the work we're doing here in Colombia, would really appreciate it. The cost of living is low here, which means that your British pounds or US dollars actually go a long way towards helping us. So any little bit, you can head over to the website to make a donation, or you can go to PayPal, which is HeatherLuna1, and I'd be very grateful. Thank you.